security in the Asia Pacific. In addition to being a policymaker, I've always seen him as an intellectual titan. As a student of international security affairs, I've read and studied most of his works and was quite influenced by some of the concepts that he developed, including the concept of cooperative security, the concept of preventive defense. And even after his retirement as Secretary of Defense, he has been active in the policy world. One of the things that I remember vividly is his role as head of a policy review on Korea, which later came to be known as the Perry Initiative. For me, this was a model of trilateral consultations on a very important security issue between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. And I often wondered if the Perry Initiative had in fact been fully implemented, we might not be in the position we are today regarding North Korea. So it is with great honor that I introduce Dr. William Perry as our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a great honor to be here today, and I welcome the opportunity to talk to this distinguished gathering. My connection to Okinawa goes back indirectly 150 years, when my ancestor, Commodore Perry, visited the various islands several times. Directly, it goes back 70 years. When I first visited Okinawa, I suspect that my connection with Okinawa 70 years ago is longer than almost anybody's in this group. I was, at the time, a young engineer. I was sent to Okinawa to help in the rebuilding of the island after the incredible devastation inflicted by World War II. The connection was very direct 20 years ago when I was the Secretary of Defense and was involved in creating an organization called SACO, Special Action Committee on Okinawa, which, among other things, proposed the pretended replacement plan. My interest then, and my interest now, from a national security point of view, is preventing or dealing, if necessary, with military conflict with North Korea, in particular preventing any military conflict with North Korea. The first crisis I had as Secretary of Defense in 1994 was North Korea. And it was over North Korea's nuclear program. And in our intent to stop North Korea from getting a nuclear bomb, we almost came to war. I don't know how many of you realize how close we were to a war with North Korea in 1994, but in my judgment it was about a 50-50 shot, very close. I was involved again in 1999 when President, now I was out of office, back at Stanford, but the President asked me to come back in temporarily to work on putting together a plan which resolved the crisis with North Korea. And I put together a tripartite team of Americans, Japanese, and South Koreans, where we formulated a program to try to deal with the North Korean problem. And I was then sent to Pyongyang and spent almost a week there negotiating with officials on a proposal which we had a handshake agreement on at the time. And getting back to Mike's earlier point, had that agreement actually been consummated, I think we'd be, it's hard to say where we'd be specifically today, but I think we'd be undoubtedly a lot better off than we are today in dealing with this crisis. When I was preparing my comments for this talk a week or so ago, there was more focused directly on Okinawa. But then something happened in the news, which you're all familiar with, which there was an agreement for a summit meeting to deal with the North Korean problem. And so I shifted my talk. I thought I would talk instead about that summit meeting and its potential for success. Because if we were to be fully successful, if we were to remove the danger of a North Korean military excursion into South Korea, it would completely change the security aspect in the Asia-Pacific region, and specifically, removing that threat would remove entirely the rationale for U.S. military forces based in Japan, and specifically based in Futenma. The Futenma base, more than anything else, is there to respond quickly to a North Korean incursion into South Korea. Why quickly? Quickly because, as I think you're all aware, the North Korean military forces are located within about 50 miles of the Seoul, the metropolis of South Korea. And so while we have always been confident that the U.S. and combined U.S. South Korean force could defeat any North Korean military incursion, we also fear there would be very great damage done to the residents of Seoul before that happened. So the whole purpose of the U.S. military planning relative to North Korea is to get reinforcements in very, very quickly to stop the North Korean forces from being able to enter Seoul. And I must say a very key component of that are the forces at Futenma. The rapid reinforcement, both land and air forces, are a key part of that plan. Therefore, if we will be able to solve the North Korean threat, the North Korean danger, that will go a long way towards removing the rationale for even having military forces in Okinawa, and could, I believe, in time lead to a situation where the forces in Okinawa could be removed altogether. Not just a matter of relocating them, but simply removing them from Okinawa. That's not going to happen, obviously, very soon, but it will be very important to know whether that is a serious prospect for the future. Whether that's a serious prospect depends, I think, very, very much on the summit meeting, which is going to be coming up, advertised to be coming up in April. I wanted to provide you historically that in 1994, President Carter went to Pyongyang to negotiate the denuclearization of North Korea. In 1999, 5 years later, I went to Pyongyang. Why? To negotiate the denuclearization of North Korea. And now it seems possible that President Trump will meet with Kim Jong-un to negotiate the denuclearization of North Korea. The same goal, 1994, 1999, and now today. So this raises a very obvious question on my mind. Are there any lessons that this administration can learn from both the successes and the failures of those two previous attempts in 1994 and 1999? I'm going to address those points. I believe the first lesson, and the most fundamental lesson, was that North Korea, at a very high cost, both political and financial high cost, has pursued for decades a nuclear program. Why? Why have they pursued it? They have pursued it to ensure the survival of their regime. The survival of the regime. That was quite obvious to me in the week that I spent in Pyongyang. It became clear that North Korea believed that the United States not only had the intent, but had the capability to overthrow the North Korean regime. And that the only way they could prevent that from happening was to deter the United States from carrying out that plan with nuclear capability. They understood that their military forces could not stand up to the combined might of South Korea and American military forces. And therefore they saw that the nuclear forces were the only way out. Now, spending less than a week in a country, you cannot learn everything about the regime. But that lesson was absolutely clear to me and to my entire team. The second lesson we learned was the North Korean leaders were not and are not crazy. They're despotic, they're ruthless, they're cruel to their own people, but they are not crazy. They have a rationale for their actions, namely to stay in power. And they follow that rationale with consistency, and I must say, with shrewdness. To make my point about how successful they've been in that, I would note every other Stalinist regime in the world has disappeared in the last few decades. North Korea is the last one standing. From their point of view, they're doing something right. The third lesson we learned was that the regime is not driven by ideology. Basically, they've decided they cannot afford an ideology that did not support their overarching goal of regime survival. As a result, they were quite flexible in the means they used to achieve that goal. A corollary of that is they're not bound by any ethical or moral standards. To them, anything goes if it satisfies that basic goal. So an agreement with North Korea is not really binding on them if they see some advantage in breaking that agreement, particularly if they could do so clandestinely. And their history of evading agreements in the last few decades bears that out. And the final and fourth lesson, and a very important one, is that while they value economic incentives, which we were offering to them at various times in our negotiations, and they would bargain for those, they would never, never trade regime survival for economic incentives. And conversely, economic disincentives, namely sanctions, will never force them to give up their nuclear program. We and four other countries have negotiated them for a decade, trying to use economic incentives to give up the nuclear regime. And that negotiation has been unsuccessful. When I had my meeting with them and I wrote my final report, which reiterated these lessons I've given you today, I ended up by saying something very important, then and now as well. I said, we must deal with North Korea as it is, and not as we would wish it to be. A corollary of that is we're dealing with them as it is, we have to understand where they are, where they're coming from, and that's why the importance of these four lessons I've given to you today. So I give them some cautionary lessons. But these lessons do not lead to the conclusion that we should not negotiate with North Korea. Quite the contrary. We should negotiate with them, but we should negotiate with them with a full understanding of who we're dealing with and what is driving them. In particular, any agreement that's made with them must be subject to a rigorous verification process that is included in the agreement. And that verification process can be very difficult when the country that is rightly called the Hermit Kingdom. These lessons do call into question whether the United States can ever achieve its stated goal of denuclearization. The stated goal when President Carter went there in '94, when I went there in '99, and now the stated goal if we have a summit meeting this year. Can we ever really negotiate our arsenal away? The North Koreans believe, as I said, that that arsenal is crucial to preventing any military attack on their country, and they believe that attack would be successful. It would cause an overthrow of their regime. So the question we have to ask ourselves, why would they give up their nuclear arsenal if that's what it's for? Or put another way, what could we offer them that would persuade them that their security can be achieved without a nuclear arsenal? That's a very difficult task. And as we approach this summit meeting, I'm very hopeful that our leaders will understand that that's the issue they're going to be facing when they come up to discussions with North Korea. When I negotiated with them in '99, besides the incentives we were offering them, we were offering them security assurances. Assurances that we would not take military action to overthrow it. I understood then that they needed that assurance so they would not give up the nuclear weapons. And that is still true today. We were able to get that agreement in 1999. But in '99, what we were negotiating was an agreement for North not to pursue a nuclear program. Today, we have an agreement to give up a nuclear arsenal that they already have. And that's a much steeper mountain to climb. It's a much harder goal to negotiate. So my first advice to the administration as they proceed forward to this summit meeting is I have to admit to a high degree of skepticism that North Korea really will negotiate away their nuclear arsenal, even though they have stated they would do so. Words are important. What do they mean by negotiate away, and how long might that take, and under what conditions, and under what verification processes? Suppose my skepticism is misplaced, and they do negotiate away the nuclear weapon. Then we are faced with the second question: how do we verify? How do we verify that agreement? Verification is critical in any arms control agreement, but particularly so with North Korea, given its history of breaking agreements. And here I must say I run into a very fundamental stumbling block. I do not know of, nor can I conceive of, any way of confidently verifying an agreement whereby North Korea states they will give up their nuclear arsenal, they will dismantle all of their nuclear arsenal and their facilities for making more. Why is that so difficult? Well, first of all, we don't know how many nuclear weapons North Korea has. There are estimates. Some estimate 20, some say 25. Suppose they come and say they have 15, and they'll give up 15, and they'll demonstrate they're giving up 15. What if they have 25 or 30? There's still then a number left. Same comments about the facilities. But the most fundamentally difficult problem is verifying the dismantlement of nuclear warheads. Now I want to give you one historical reference to this. We've had many nuclear agreements with first the Soviet Union and later with Russia. None of those agreements ever called for verifying the dismantlement of nuclear warheads. None of them. The agreements mentioned nuclear warheads. They even mentioned the number of nuclear warheads. But they really involved dismantlement of the carriers, the missiles that carried them. And our way of verifying was to verify that the missiles were destroyed, the silos were destroyed, say. And then we inferred from that how many warheads were destroyed. We never had a way of counting Russian or Soviet nuclear warheads. Even today, if you had asked me how many nuclear warheads Russia has, we have an arms control agreement with them called New START. We can verify the number of operational systems they have deployed. We have no idea how many nuclear warheads they might have in storage and reserve. And our estimates of that could be off not by 10 or 100, it could be off by thousands. So it would be a fundamental error to believe that we could verify reliably a treaty by which North Korea agreed to dismantle all of its nuclear weapons and to not build more. But because we can't verify that kind of an agreement, does not mean we shouldn't negotiate a disarmament agreement with North Korea. On the contrary, we should move forward and try to negotiate an agreement. We do know that North Korea has a nuclear arsenal and must do all we can to contain and to deter that arsenal. And we can strengthen our containment by reaching an agreement with North Korea on various things that would lower the danger. We could get, for example, a testing ban on nuclear weapons. We might be able to get a testing ban on the testing of long-range missiles, both of which we could verify with a high degree of reliability. We should definitely want some sort of an agreement on the limit that stops the transfer of any nuclear weapons or components or technology. That would be more difficult to verify, but also something worth trying to do. This we could do in the short term. In the long term, we might move forward to a denuclearization agreement, but I will point out to you that's not going to happen very soon in any way that we can reliably verify. So the first step, I think, is to get various agreements that lower the danger and then work over the longer term to remove it altogether. The goal should be denuclearization, but understanding it's going to take a long time to achieve that. So let me sum up my comment about this summer meeting. I believe useful, very useful results can be attained from negotiations. Some of them directly and immediately, other than can be setting up a process which over a long period of time can end in denuclearization. My concern is that negotiations may turn out to fail because we're entering them with unrealistic expectations, because we expect immediate results, short term, that are just simply not reasonable to achieve. But I do believe that a deal can be had to significantly improve our security and the security of our allies. And I want to end my comments by saying that deal is there and available, I think. The other unrealistic goal of an immediate denuclearization is, I think, not there. And so we should pursue the deal that is there, that is, we should not let the best be the enemy of the good. If there's something good we can do, and we ought to achieve it, we should not let ourselves be dissuaded from pursuing that because we cannot achieve everything we want right away. Thank you very much.